Looking back over my life, it feels like I've been on this lifelong personal and intellectual journey along the contours of the Black American landscape of agriculture and food. Born and raised in Texas, I am the proud product of generations of Black farmers, sharecroppers, and other Black folks who worked the land across the rural South in places like Pitt County, North Carolina, and Waco, Texas. During my childhood summers, I spent my childhood summers in Pitt County, North Carolina, with my great-grandfather on his porch, listening to incredible stories about my family's complicated historical relationship to agriculture. I say complicated because it required them to engage in back-breaking work. But as I got older and I started to think more about this relationship between my family and agriculture, I realized that the system that they were a part of, while it yielded them some type of food security, it also was designed to inflict more harm than good on Black people. As I got older, I found myself thinking more about this relationship, and I started spending less summers in Pitt County, and there was a set of educational experiences that brought me to think different about the relationship between Black people and agriculture. Those educational experiences started right here on the campus of Prairie View A&M University. As a high school student, I participated in what was called the Research Apprenticeship Program for Agricultural Sciences. As a sophomore and junior in high school, I was exposed to the science of agricultural production. Then as an undergraduate student right here at Prairie View, I studied agricultural economics, where I learned about the economics of agricultural systems. Then as a graduate student at Cornell University working on my Ph.D., I learned about the sociology of that agricultural system. So putting them in conversation together, the economics, the science, and the sociology, I started thinking differently about agriculture and Black people. In fact, as I thought more about this now as a professor and social scientist, I'm thinking differently about the relationship between Black people and agriculture. In my first book, Food Power Politics, the food story of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement, I think about this relationship, but I don't think about this relationship as a way to understand my family or as a way to understand the past. I think about this also as a way to contribute what a number of activists in what we call the food justice movement call Black food futures. By definition, Black food futures refers to this time that doesn't exist yet, but it also existed in the past, playing with time and space. It's a time where Black people have the full autonomy and capacity to decide when, where, and how they access food, creating their own ways of knowing and being through food systems. While this seems like a lofty goal to many people, and some people may be impossible, it also raises the question, how can we work collectively to build a world for Black food futures to exist? In my own research, I grappled with this question, but in the time that we have today, I want to offer an answer to this question. But my answer to this question takes the form of a multi-dimensional idea. But first is I have to look into the mind of Mr. Alvin Ailey, one of the most important Black choreographers in American history, to work out this idea. So I want to think out loud with you all with Mr. Alvin Ailey. As one of the most important Black choreographers, he believed by definition what choreography was. It was a sequence and coordination of movements in dance. So by definition, I want to offer this idea of the choreography of Black food futures. The choreography of Black food futures represents this dynamic and systematic coordinated movement of Black people who are using agriculture and food as ways to create new ways of knowing for themselves. They're addressing the social, the economic, the political, and the environmental dynamics that shape their relationships to food, but it's their future, so they want to be able to design it themselves. Dance in Black life is a cultural artifact. Also, food in Black life is a cultural artifact. When many times when we think about scenes of Black joy, both past and present, we see food and dance operating together. But what can dance teach us about food? And what is this idea of the choreography of Black food futures? To do this, I want to think about Alvin Ailey and think about Alvin Ailey's life in his mind. Alvin Ailey was born less than 2 hours northwest of this campus in Rogers, Texas. Alvin Ailey grew up in the Brazos River Valley region of the state of Texas. He grew up in the middle of cotton fields for the first decade of his life. He watched black folks work the land, but he also watched black folks celebrate their lives, even in the context of back-breaking work in cotton fields. By the age of 10, Alvin Ailey and his mother moved to Los Angeles, where he met a girl by the name of Carmen. And Carmen introduced Alvin Ailey to the world of dance. And in his autobiography, he writes that the rest was history. In fact, Alvin Ailey believed that dance could be a way for black folks to express their lives beyond oppression and beyond those times in which they found themselves struggling. Therefore, Alvin Ailey knew this, and when he moved to New York City to create the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater in the 1950s, he did this so in the context of the American Civil Rights Movement. At the time in New York, black folks weren't allowed to dance at some of the bigger places in New York City. So he created this theater not only as a way for black people to be seen, but also for a way for them to create their own ways of knowing and being and dancing. This is important to know because Alvin Ailey believed that the mission of the choreographer, the very mission of the choreographer was to create movement and then search for truth in that very movement. And he also said, as choreographers, they start with this empty space. And then they take 2 or 3 folks and bring them together in this space. And then the choreographer tells them to carve out that very space. Alvin Ailey says he loves to do this kind of thing because he's making something out of nothing. He also argued that dance was an act of progress, an act of joy, an act of music, an act of excitement. So Alvin Ailey is saying that choreographers are doing something. And for me, in translating Alvin Ailey, there's something about empty space, people, actionable thinking, and creative analytics that I think that Alvin Ailey teaches us. The choreographer begins with an empty space, and then they bring people into that very space. And they allow people to think through action, but they also engage in creative analytics. Empty space, people, actionable thinking, and creative analytics. Alvin Ailey says first that we began with an empty space. So those of us who want to engage in building black food futures, we first begin with the empty space. But this empty space is not necessarily empty. In fact, it represents infinite and endless possibilities where black folks can think innovatively about their futures in the past and the present. But in order to do this, we have to first put black people at the center of this particular future. We have to create this human-centered design where black people can decide how to access food. To some people in this room, it may seem mundane to think about accessing food. But to folks who've always struggled or had some type of different relationship with food, there's a need for them to exercise autonomy and agency in producing that particular kind of food and deciding the kind of food that they want. But once you have that empty space, and you bring black folks into that space, you want those in that space who are the most vulnerable, those who understand intimately what food insecurity is. Food insecurity is not just some rate. It's not just some number. It is a very intimate feeling that people have to deal with every day, and black folks deal with high rates of those in their communities. But we need the empty space, we need the people, but we also need actionable thinking. Actionable thinking understands the collective situation of a people and translates that situation into direct action. Action that allows the people to think in real time, understanding what's going on at that very moment. So you have the empty space, you have the people, and you have the actionable thinking. But what's so important about this actionable thinking is that when you think about those who are at the center of this particular context, you also have to think about the ways in which these people have been denied access to food. They've been denied access to life-giving, immune-boosting food. So we need to give them food that can allow their bodies to be able to fight against diet-related illnesses or illnesses that are linked to diets, like diabetes, kidney disease, hypertension, high blood pressure, and heart disease. I say those things because many of us in this room are familiar with those diseases, whether it's in your family, whether you have it, or it's in your community. And these kind of diseases have been doing a lot in our communities. So how do we create actions or actionable thinking to get ahead of that? But then we also need creative analytics. Creative analytics allow us a space to think differently about what we're doing in black food futures. Creative analytics allows us to use imagination as a way to engineer brighter black food futures. Creative analytics allows us to use current and historical data. And we merge that with this idea of imagination because Black Food Futures is all about imagining a world where Black people can do what they want to do in the context of food. And for that purpose, I call that the choreography of Black Food Futures. And that Black folks have to work in sync. Black folks have to work in coordinated movement to ensure that they have Black food futures that are bright for them. But what's important about Black Food Futures is that it's also designed to help all people. So those who are working at this very moment in places like Jackson, Mississippi, in places like the Yazoo, Mississippi, Delta region of Mississippi, places like Arkansas, Pitt County, North Carolina, Waco, Texas, Tallahassee, Florida, they're thinking about Black food futures, but they're also thinking about futures, brighter futures for all, futures that will be sustainable and equitable. Thank you for listening.